For the past 100 days, I challenged myself to not rip every page out of my sketchbook. Alright, I'm kidding. It was actually learning how to draw. With zero experience, things didn't go exactly as I planned. And just as I started getting the hang of traditional art, I scrapped it all and switched to digital art. Over the course of 100 days, I faced frustrations, setbacks, and moments where I wanted to quit. But eventually, I finally broke through, going from this to this. And here's how. I started day 1 very clueless. As a complete beginner in art, I had no idea where to start. But I know why I wanted to start. So I went online, grabbed a picture of my favorite character Kana, and tried my best to replicate everything I see and put it on paper. And this was the result. Since I'm writing this script around 4 months after the last time I saw this drawing, you have no idea how hard I'm trying right now to not rip this page out and stash it somewhere so no one can ever see it again. Seriously. Oh yeah, I immediately got another harsh reality check because I couldn't even draw a circle. So I thought to myself, this was gonna be a long 100 days. For the next couple of days, I did a little bit of everything. Faces, hair, and bodies. I'll be quite honest with you. 4 days into my art journey, I was lost. I was quick to blame my pencil, but even after switching to a mechanical pencil, my drawing didn't improve, and I had a realization that maybe I just wasn't good enough for this. I wanted to quit right there. Looking at the art I was drawing, I just thought I was not making enough meaningful progress to continue. However, things changed on day 5. I sat down with a positive mindset and just drew without any pressure to do well. I had my first big breakthrough and drew this. Even now, 100 days later, this drawing of Mencho still holds a special place in my heart. Yes, I'm looking at it now with 100 days of experience. There's so many things I can nitpick and so many mistakes I can see with a glance of an eye, but I am still proud of this art. Because back in my day 5 mind, this was the best thing I've drawn in my life, and it made me believe I can do this. I am actually getting better at drawing. And for that, this drawing of Mencho will continue to carry special memories for me, and I will probably cherish this piece forever. In my second week of learning how to draw, I mostly did studies. Back then, I don't know what I was thinking. I jumped from drawing faces for 2 days to drawing hair for 3 days, then jumped right into bodies. Then everything at once. Not only that, but I had trouble sticking to one thing longer than 3 days. Looking back, it was a crucial mistake. So I want to show you these drawings I did. At a glance, you can obviously tell I did not learn proper proportions and anatomy because the neck on the left is really long like a giraffe. Then the side profile drawing, the head is way bigger than normal. It obviously didn't come out well, but I think it's still progress. On day 10, I did a drawing of Chisato that was memorable and at the same time frustrating. I remember that I was completely mind blown because I was trying to replicate the reference. Midway through, I realized I did not have the experience and preparation to draw this. The character was actually doing a pose, and I was just not ready for it. You see, before this drawing, my past art was all characters just standing still from the front, back, and sides. And Chisato here is raising her legs and skirt interacting with what her legs are doing. Her hands are flashing some signs, while she is positioned at a side angle. Anyways, I could keep going on, but you get the picture. Oh, by the way, I haven't learned how to draw hands yet. So yeah, hopelessness was all I felt after finishing this. On day 15, I spent a couple of days finally learning how to draw hands and feet. I know what you might be thinking. Since a lot of characters wear shoes, is it even necessary to learn how to draw feet? Yes, it is. And it's not because I'm a degenerate. A perfectionist. It's because I believe you shouldn't neglect certain details of the body just because it's covered up. And because I'm still in the beginning of my art journey, I mostly just copy the references, so learning feet is a good way to challenge myself. So in these 2 drawings, I replaced the character's shoes with feet. I actually had a lot of fun doing this challenge, and this was a step in the right direction. Day 19 is a memorable and important day for my drawing journey. I was getting a bit discouraged about my recent drawings, so I decided to clear my mind and revisit the drawing I drew on day 10. And comparing it now side by side, I am pleased with how this turned out. Aside from the obvious issues, for 19 days of art, I was making good progress. On day 22, I finally dipped my toes into coloring. Since I was still drawing traditionally, I had to get color pencils, and coloring was way harder than I initially thought. First of all, you have to keep on coloring over and over in order to fill the entire space. It required a lot of effort, and by the time I was done, my hands were sore as hell. And this was my debut with color. In the last couple of days leading up to day 30, I drew one character per day. And out of all 100 days of art, day 26 is honestly my favorite day. I decided to challenge myself and drew an original character. For the past month, my method of learning was to learn some basics, grab an illustration, then copy it as close as possible. But on this day, I looked at some references and basically cooked up an original character myself. Even looking at it today, I'm still super proud of myself and glad I drew her. Oh, by the way, I decided to name her Subjan. Riding the momentum and my emotions at an all-time high, I have to share what I drew on day 28. This was probably my best drawing on traditional, and I really love how it turned out. If I brought my past self from day 1 and showed him this art and said you drew this, I would have probably slapped myself and told myself to quit being delusional. This was how good it was, honestly. On day 30, I drew Kana, the very first character that I drew on day 1, to kind of benchmark my art skills so far. Not gonna lie, I tried extremely hard for this one, and I spent over 7 hours from start to finish. I'm proud of what my past self have accomplished so far, and looking at it now, I'm still impressed, especially by how I colored it. After my major breakthroughs in art, you would think things can only go up, right? Wrong. So after 30 days, I decided it was time to step into the world of digital art. After dusting off my old Osu tablet, I downloaded Clip Studio, activated the trial, and jumped right into digital art. And it was bad. I was having a lot of trouble either with how the program works, getting used to drawing on a screenless tablet, staring at my screen instead of paper, and overall, it just feels not right. I'm not gonna go too deep into the problems I faced, because I already covered that in this video. But in short, I did not draw a character until a week into my digital arc, on day 37. And the art came out pretty bad. This was my first attempt at a male character as well, and honestly, after I finished drawing, it feels like I took 1 step forward and 2 steps back. Ultimately, I'm left with more questions than answers, like, was this really a good idea? Did I jump the gun and swap to digital too fast? Day 40 was a pretty important day for me. I was pretty lost on what direction I wanted to go, and I came up with a plan that might sound stupid. But hear me out, since I'm still transitioning from traditional to digital art, what if I just draw the same character over and over again? That way, I don't have to waste any time browsing for references, and drawing my favorite character will directly boost my motivation to draw more. And this was probably the best decision I ever made. So for the next couple of weeks, I only drew Kana. I honestly lost count on how many I drew over these 2 weeks, and this might surprise you, but I actually learned a lot. One game-changing tool on digital is definitely the lasso tool. I can literally adjust my mistakes on the fly, which is sort of a double-edged sword because after I started using this tool, I kind of rely on it way too much. Like you see here, the difference between my sketch and line art. I literally use this tool to correct mistakes, and I don't know if it's a good thing. Anyways, on the halfway mark day 50, I finally learned how to color digitally and finished this piece. One goal I have for myself is to get good at coloring and shading because I believe the colors are what elevates an illustration, and the better I get at this skill, the more confidence I will have. The coloring process actually took me way longer than sketching and line art, which I'm quite surprised with. Anyways, the past 2 weeks of Kana studies brought my artistic confidence up quite high. I finally got used to drawing on digital, and it feels like my traditional skills has finally translated into digital. And the tools I've been slowly implementing into my art makes this transition fun and worth it. However, since I was only drawing one character, a lingering thought kept buzzing in the back of my mind. What if I make Kana drawing one trick and I can't draw anything else? There's another art block I have to overcome, which was the fear of drawing new things. I know it sounds weird, but I actually was growing too comfortable, and I have a fear of challenging myself. I know I could never improve if I don't step outside my safe space, so I went into the next day with an open mindset. And finally on day 52, I drew a different character. I used a reference I found on Pinterest and drew my OC Subjan that I created on day 26. So yeah, 26 days later, I drew her again. So after sketching and line art, I used most of my time coloring, and I'm definitely very proud of how she came out. Comparing her to the version I drew 26 days earlier, she definitely got a glow up. Oh, I also added this little blob on top of her head and named him ScribeCoon, which adds up to subscribe. So make sure to subscribe to the channel. For the next week, I decided to switch things up and learn perspective. I have honestly been avoiding perspective because it seems extremely hard, but I know it's time to face my fears. So on day 55, I played around with this saber I drew and tried to convert this art to one with a bottom perspective. And I was stuck. This was hard and my brain stopped working for the day. So after studying from references for a couple of days, I had another character development moment in art on day 60. Since this was my second month of drawing, I wanted it to look extra special. So I browsed Pinterest again and found this reference. And instead of drawing the character from the reference, I would be drawing Kana again. And the final results came out pretty good. I was super proud of it, and overall I had a lot of fun with the process for this piece. One thing that I found to be, I don't know if you can call it a weakness of mine, is that while I was drawing, I discovered that I take a long time to draw. This piece clocked in at 16 hours, so yeah, I definitely take my sweet time drawing. After drawing for 2 months every day, I decided to give myself a break and did something I never done before. So on day 61, I drew chibi style art. So I took Subjan and turned her into chibi. This took only 4 hours to draw, which is pretty fast by my standards. Going into this style of drawing, I didn't expect to learn anything. But I did actually learn something that was quite interesting, which is how people draw hands and feet in chibi style. This was something I never noticed before, but chibi artists tend to not draw lists. You can literally take shortcuts and not draw any fingers or toes if you want. And since I'm lazy, this is exactly what I did. I also didn't go too crazy on the shading for this, and overall it was very easy and a breath of fresh air after drawing non-stop every day. On day 69, I did an art study of Yugen. I came across this illustration of Yotsuha from Heaven's Burns Red, and the coloring really caught my eye, so I got started with copying the reference. And I was actually not super proud of how the art came out, but I just have to show you why. Here, can you see why I hate this art? I'll give you 3 seconds. Alright, so I actually slacked big time drawing this, and one distinct problem is the line art. At first glance, if you're not paying attention, you probably can't really tell why it's bad, but when I zoom in, you can see exactly what I mean. Just look at this line quality. So what I did was I used this border effect feature in Clip Studio and basically turned the borders black, and it automatically did the line art for me. I can't recommend this feature to anyone that have messy sketches and lines like me, or else you will get very uneven lines like this. So putting it bluntly, I was lazy and didn't want to do the line art. So I tried to cut corners on my art, and I broke basically the #1 rule in my opinion. Never take the easy way out when you are trying to learn something. I definitely learned an important lesson on that day. I can't be lazy and skip a step if I want to improve. Even when I'm just doing a line art, I'm still practicing line confidence, and a number of strokes help me get used to drawing digitally. And your art quality reflects it. But I'm glad I did this because it will only make me a better artist going forward. Okay, I swear I'm not doing this on purpose, but after another 26 days since my last Subjan art, I drew her again on day 78. Alright, I didn't draw her exactly on this day, but it took me around 5 days from start to finish, and I completed this art exactly 26 days after my last one. This art is probably my most challenging one so far because this is the first time I used a real-life photo reference pose to draw, so it challenged a lot of my skills. Since this is a pose of a character looking up and the camera angle is upside down, it was impossible for me to draw like this. So I had to rotate my canvas so I can start from the right side up. The part where I had the most trouble with was the face. Since the reference is from a photo, I have to basically convert the face from my own 2 drawings of Subjan. As you can see from the time lapse, I had a lot of trouble with it. Looking at this art now, I am pretty impressed all things considered. I really like the shading of her clothes. Wait a sec, I'm just spotting this right now. The legs looks kinda awkward. And what is going on with these fingers? I mean, you can clearly tell I'm sacking on the fingers just because from this angle, the clothes are blocking the hand. But I'm actually pretty disappointed by how I drew the fingers here. I don't really want to talk about the background, I kinda just took some textures and pasted them on, so it looked out of place in a way. Alright, pretend it doesn't have a background. You didn't see anything. Subjan is just floating in midair. Also, I'm missing a huge component that I just now noticed after looking at the layers. I was gonna draw ScribeCoon somewhere, but I guess I got sidetracked and I forgot completely. Leading up to day 100, I did 2 art studies. The first one is from Pigone. I really like how they did the shading, so when I did a study, I wanted to replicate and understand exactly how they shade, especially the clothing. There are a lot of new things I learned while drawing this. Like for example, there are these outlines and shadings with colors that confused the heck out of me. Like why are there blue specks here on the clothing? Did she spill blue Gatorade on herself? But then I realized that these are kinda like lightings and reflections from her surroundings. And this actually blew my mind. When I started paying attention to these things, it leveled up my observation skills, but what gave me the most trouble with this art was this area right here. There's a lot going on, like the hair draping onto the clothes and the umbrella is like sticking out. I actually really like how I drew the hands here. Well, maybe except for the pinky. And the most important thing that I discovered after finishing this art was the size of my head. Looking back at a couple of my drawings, I tend to draw the character's head bigger than normal, which kinda ruins the character's proportion in a way. Also, I cannot for the life of me stop comparing my study to the original artists. The difference is just night and day. Even when I'm trying to replicate everything, it just feels like I'm light years away from their skills. I honestly really need to stop comparing myself to others and just focus on the art I've drawn. And the main takeaway I've learned so far is the question I keep asking myself every night. Did I get a little bit better than the me from yesterday? The next study I did was from Tokutaro. This is a character from a manga I've been reading, and after coming across this illustration from the mangaka while reading, I knew I just had to draw it. I really like the art style, so I basically did a one-to-one study, and to be honest, I was tryharding for the entire 26 hours that it took me to draw this. Did it really took 26 hours for me? Anyways, there were some parts that were cut out, so I had to add it in myself. So it did challenge my imagination, especially this part. I had the most trouble with the hands, and I had to do this pose myself and create a reference so I can easily visualize it. My favorite part of this exercise is how the eyes were colored. After following the coloring style, I can say that these are the best eyes I've drawn so far on my journey. But yeah, after finishing this illustration, it opened up my eyes to so many new techniques, and I'll be sure to use these techniques I've accumulated so far for my final art on day 100. Going into my last artwork, I gave myself a week to finish this project, and first, I'll just show you the end results of my sweat and tears after 21 grueling hours of work. There is a ton of backstory that went into this art of Marin. I had quite the struggle figuring out what I wanted to draw. Since this was my final art before I posted this video, I wanted to draw something great. So I poured everything I've learned in the past 345 hours, spanned across 100 days, into this artwork. I actually went into my final days blind. This means I haven't decided on what pose I wanted my character to be in. I first browsed Pinterest and doom scrolled for a good hour before narrowing down to a few poses I liked. I initially drew this sketch of a character and literally stared at the screen for 2 hours. No, I am not kidding. The reason is because going into my final artwork, I had no idea who exactly I wanted to draw. I didn't want to draw Kana again because I always draw her. I didn't want to draw Subjan again because I don't want to keep asking you to subscribe. But most importantly, I wanted to challenge myself and draw someone I have never drawn before in these 100 days. Have you ever felt completely lost trying to draw something? This was what I was experiencing. Anyways, this pose reminded me too much of the art study I did earlier, so I completely threw the sketch away and started drawing with a clear mind and came up with this initial sketch. I decided to draw Marin because while I was feeling lost, I took a break to browse for upcoming anime of summer 2025 and saw her on the top. So yeah, after having a clear goal and pose in mind, everything else came smoothly after that. Well, except for the eyes. So I initially colored my eyes like this, which felt too overly detailed and I hated how there's so many things going on. So the second time through, I simplified my coloring and my details and it came out pretty great. I also challenged myself to draw a simple background and I think this time it enhanced the overall illustration I had in mind. Overall, I was very proud of how my artwork came out. Going into this journey, I had no idea how long I would last. I was not the kind of person to dedicate myself to something so long. And for art, I thought I would draw for maybe 30 days and call it quits. But as I kept drawing, I started having more fun, and each art I drew, the bad ones and the good ones, all motivated me to keep going. On day 1, I was someone who can't draw, but now after 100 days, I can proudly say I am someone who draws.